Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming. This is an opportunity for us to respond to the budget that was released last night and a time to reflect upon the budget and the budget process more importantly. You know, chaos in the society is a time of opportunity, but only if we seize that opportunity and seize the moment. The budget in 2013 reflects chaos in government, the community and the future. Those of us who are living in the present are stealing their future from their children. It's time we change things. Every year we have a budget speech in Canberra. It's not a speech framed by the people that we elect to Parliament. It's a speech framed by the bureaucrats in Canberra. They're the ones who set the agenda for the nation. We need to elect people to government to take control of the government, who are not controlled by the government and not controlled by the government machine itself. Otherwise, they're not responding to what the real agenda should be addressing the nation. Australia can be strong, but only if we exercise proper management control. Management control over the budget and the agenda that we set. We need to get more from the money we spend now. There's been an overwhelming concern in the budget by Gillard and indeed by Abbott and Swan in respect of revenue, about the decline in government revenue. That's why Abbott and Swan and Gillard support an increase in tax levies, an increase in corporate tax so that you pay. Increases in taxes will only shrink the amount of money available in the private sector, which creates the wealth for the economy. So the pie will get smaller and we'll lose the base of Australia's wealth. Australia is over-reliant on taxation as a source of government revenue. The measures announced in the federal budget confirm we are still slowly moving to the edge of a fiscal cliff. Imbalances appear to be chronic and our standard of living is at risk. It's time to review the government revenue streams by a bipartisan approach to budgeting and seeing how the nation should function. It's time for genuine tax reform and to reinstate Australia's financial future. A Palmer United government will reduce taxes and reduce income taxes to release more money for families in Australia and bring real management to the government activities for the first time in a century. Everyone knows that when they tender for government contracts, they add 150% to the price of the tender. 50% to pay the government's tax and 100% because it is the government. But who pays? You and I. If we pay normal amounts, we don't need so much revenue. The concentration of revenue in overpriced costs and projects that you've seen right around this country, the government and the opposition have got no idea how to grow the economy. Their concentration on revenue fails to realise that the real challenge is to grow the economy, how to increase the pie, so the pie gets bigger, the revenue grows automatically with it, and we can have better health and better services and education and other areas. So you've got to ask, why is this so? Why have we reached this situation? An email was sent to me recently which explains that the 6 leading ministers of the government, from Mrs Gillard down, have a collective work experience of 181 years, but only 13 years in the private sector. If you take out those 13 years, the number of years that was spent in trade union and as lawyers, they've only got 2 years in the private sector out of 181. No years spent running their own business, no years spent starting their own business, no years spent as a director of a family business or a company, no years as director of a public company, no years as a senior position of a public company, no years as a senior position of a private company, no years working in corporate finance, no years in corporate business or restructuring, no years working at a bank, no years experience in capital markets, no years experience in stockbroking, no years in negotiating debt or negotiating business deals, no years running a small business, no years with the World Bank, International Monetary Fund or the OECD, and no years in Treasury or Finance. But these are the people who have placed Australia in a perilous debt position. This year's budget confirms that Labor is destroying Australia. Budget 2013 increases debt, produces more deficit, more taxes, confirms broken promises. How will families cope with higher costs and more taxes, with no hope for the future and the destruction of Australian services? After decades of being misled, Aussies want an economic management that makes a difference in their lives. Labor and the Liberals have failed to provide any real alternative. If we believe Wayne Swan, the total gross debt is to breach $300 billion debt ceiling in the Ford estimates. While there have been 5 years of deficit, Swan predicts there'll be 2 more years to come of deficits. The truth, if things are not changed, is that there'll be 20 more years to come of deficit. But that's okay. Swan won't be there. He'll be in a retirement home. So by then, what does he care? Next year, we have a record net debt of $192 billion. It's a record that will be broken if we rely on the two-party system. No road to surplus or no road to prosperity. The economy is doing well. The Aussie dollar is at $1 US. It can't get better than this. But where is the prosperity? Where is it? Is it in the streets of Elizabeth in South Australia, where people are struggling to worry about their job? Is it in the Hunter Valley, where the environment is destroyed and people are desperate because of the marriages that are breaking up? Is it in the Latrobe Valley, where unemployment has reached 25%? And we say that the economy is good, that our nation is prosperous, while our people out there suffer. Broken promises galore, no tax cuts. I won't even get a baby bonus in 2014, but that's what I was thinking. But Mr. Swan's confirmed that I will get the baby bonus, so that makes a big difference for me. A politician is synonymous with a broken word in this country. And that's what's wrong with the nation. Over $25 billion more for Australians to pay in higher taxes over the next 4 years. This is a budget with few surprises, and it's little to be enthused about. The Australian economy, while performing well compared to many international peers, is treading water in 2012 and 13 and will continue to be a challenging year with lower real GDP growth and higher unemployment. This will only be exacerbated by Treasury's projection that new business investment as a share of GDP has peaked, formally signaling an end to the mining boom. The budget lays the groundwork for the well-publicised funding of the Gonski report and funding of those reforms, and a rollout of the National Disability Scheme, something the government should have done years ago, with the massive revenue that's been created by the Commonwealth Government. The Gonski report is not a reform, it's a report. It's a report on the former Education Minister, Mrs. Gillard, Miss Gillard or whatever she's called. She was the Education Minister. If we're in trouble in education, if there's deficits to be done, it's because of her doing. It's a measure of her incompetence as the Minister for Education. The Gonski report is a report on her. It's not a reform, and at all, it's Gillard's report card, and all Australians will be paying to correct that. It also sets out an additional $24 billion of infrastructure investment in 2018 and 19. This infrastructure should have been invested by the government years ago. The failure to do so has held Australia back for many years and cost tens or hundreds of thousands of jobs across this nation. The real challenge with this large-scale spending initiative is execution, to ensure that the expenditure actually supports effective and productive enhancing outcomes. And this is the challenge in the years ahead, which should have been met years ago. Many major corporates will likely be concerned by the government's initiative to protect the corporate tax base and the erosion of loopholes. The range of issues upon which they will be clamping down include multinational structures, consolidation regime, offshore banking unit, foreign resident capital gains tax, offshore marketing hubs, restructures, dividend washing and exploration activity. The government is forecasting that addressing these issues will generate $4.3 billion in tax revenue over the forward estimates. Given the challenges associated with previous consultation regarding the mining and carbon taxes, this is unlikely to be achieved. It's a reasonable concern about the government's ability to meaningfully engage across a range of complex, detailed legal issues. The result is that investment and confidence in Australia is destroyed. I warned that would happen if Australia adopted the Mining Act tax and if it was introduced. It has happened and it was introduced. The budget says that we're at the end of the mining boom, the end. It's happened because of the lack of planning, foresight, initiative and incentive of the Gillard government. And the other side's not much better as they go along in parity, increasing our taxes and not caring about our people. This is because internationally the perception is that the government is a high-taxing government, engaged in class warfare and not interested in generating wealth. And that means the investment that's available in the international community won't be directed at Australia because the government's hostile to it. Not only is the government hostile to it, the opposition's hostile to it. A basic problem with this budget is it plays the class war. It creates incentives for people to be unemployed, not to be productively employed. It makes incentives for people to be lazy, not to offer themselves in service for the country. We've recently celebrated Anzac Day, and Australians went overseas not as members of the Liberal Party or the Labor Party, not as members of the upper or lower class, but as Australians. And the government should have a responsibility for all Australians and provide for their welfare. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to care. The budget cancels previous commitments to tax cuts and replaces them with the means-tested payments because a team of losers seeks to save themselves from defeat by creating a political contest in this country of billionaires versus battlers with the approval of the Labor backbench. We're all Australians, regardless of how much we have in life, whether we're rich or poor. We come from a diverse and important background. Australians believe in 90% of the same things. Let's concentrate on the 90% of things we do believe in, and who knows, maybe that 10% of things we have differences will disappear. The government needs to create confidence, release money into the economy rather than hoard it, and rather than borrow it, and stimulate the economy to have real industrial growth and jobs. Exactly the opposite of what they're doing at the moment, where they're contracting the economy, increasing the amount of revenue in the public sector and reducing it in the private sector. It needs to create incentives not to be unemployed, but to have a job and develop a career. A Palmer government will slash the tax rate by 50% for those Australians having a second job from the money they earn from that job. As I travel about Australia, in every electorate that I've been in, people have approached me and said, I just can't seem to get ahead. I have a second job, but the taxation rate kills me. My wife said there's no point having it. And we've reached a very difficult situation in Australia if we're going to allow that sort of thing to continue. The government must be as interested in wealth creation as it seems to be in wealth distribution and retribution. A Palmer government would use the resources from Western Australia and Queensland we export to Asia around $100 a tonne as a raw material to encourage the establishment of downstream processing industries to produce final metal products in copper, nickel and other areas in our states where jobs are scarce and enterprise is needed. In Tasmania, New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia. We've got to address unemployment in the Latrobe Valley in Victoria, and in Tasmania where the unemployment rate has reached 7.5%, and in Elizabeth where the manufacturing industry is declining and the car industry is leaving Australia. In country Queensland and country New South Wales and right across Australia, we need to address the problems of unemployment, and we can do it by taking what we do well and doing it better. To sell a final product, not for $100 a tonne, but for $20,000 a tonne, will boost our exports, increase our balance of payments, and provide a stronger revenue base. How can it be that Japan, a country with higher wages, higher employment costs, higher energy costs, and with the tyranny of distance, uses our resources to fuel their economy, where they've become the third largest economy in the world based on Australian resources, while our people languish and suffer in unemployment and lack of enterprise and lack of spirit because we give away our resources and we don't use some of them. It doesn't mean we shouldn't still to export our resources, but we should use those resources to do what we do better and grow our economy. And why can't we be as strong as the Japanese? Why can't Australian workers be as efficient? I'm sure we can be. If we do that, we'll have more money for our schools, our universities and our hospitals. Government service and revenue will grow, and we can end a world record that we hold for the highest infant mortality rate in the world among Aboriginal unborn and newborn children. A rate that's higher than Peru, a rate that's higher than the depths of Africa. And yet we live in a developed country. We're supposed to care about Australians regardless of their colour, and we talk about reconciliation. We talk about reconciliation before we've ensured the basic rights of people to live and to prosper on an equal basis across this continent. The government must protect the vulnerable, not to create more citizens of the state to foster, but more self-reliant citizens who can contribute to the nation in a degree of service rather than of taking. The man of the land in our regions has become the forgotten Australian, and we need to take 25% of the wealth that's generated from a region to be reinvested in that region, not just for the people who live there, but for the nation itself. For there can be no better track record than achievement in an area to show what they can contribute to the tax base of this country. You've only got to drive through the Hunter Valley in New South Wales and see the destruction that's happened over 50 or 60 years with no reinvestment in the area, a lack of government service, and no one really caring. Of course, that's not good business. It's not good for Australia. We should have been reinvesting there in infrastructure so we could grow our exports. We can't forget the Australians living in our cities, especially if they're paying mortgages in our big cities. A Palmer government would abolish the carbon tax, not from when it's elected, but from when the tax was introduced, and refund electricity increases being paid this year to all Australians. By that way, it would release more money into the economy, it would stimulate more growth, create a higher level of consumer demand, and create prosperity for all Australians. And this way, the revenue base would grow, but it would grow in a productive manner rather than an unproductive manner. Gillard and Swan seem to say to us Australians, the harder you try, the harder we'll make it for you. This budget will be Swan's swan song. People who put their homes on the line to create jobs in small businesses deserve to be supported by government and deserve to have an environment which will create more jobs for the people. People who work hard and put money aside so that they won't be burdened by others should be encouraged, not hit with extra taxation and extra policies and penalised. When the Palmer United Party is elected, we will repeal the carbon tax and the mining taxes. By abolishing the mining tax, a Palmer government will make Australia a better place to invest and let the world know that we don't punish success and we encourage investment. Abolishing the carbon tax and the mining tax will make every job in our economy much more secure. A Palmer government would deliver tax thrust through saving measures. There's so much money that we can save even procurement of our defence forces, it's unbelievable. Billions of dollars are being wasted every day by people that don't care about this country or care about the role that they play. And a Palmer government would outlaw lobbyists having a legal requirement that former ministers from all sides of politics would need to have left Parliament for a minimum of 10 years before they could be employed in any lobbying activity or for a lobbying institution. It would eliminate the ability for lobbyists to be members of Australian registered political parties. And the Australian government would learn to do more with what it has rather than to seek every time a solution to increase the taxes on the men and women that live in this country. Moreover, the budget stands as an example of everything that's wrong with this country. We need to change our processes and how we approach things. If we don't, those processes will change us and they will destroy our standard of living, destroy our values as Australians. This is a call to action for every Australian, wherever they live, to do more, and to do more, not less, to give yourself and your nation a secure and in the final analysis, awareness that we only have ourselves to rely on. Determined to protect all that we hold dear, Tony Abbott and Julia Gillard are a product of that process. For 30 years they've been in Parliament, and for 30 years they've done nothing to enhance the value of this nation and not even held a job. The government and the budget, from one side or the other, over the last 20 years leads nowhere. They don't have a point of view. They know not where they're going to. They're real nowhere men. A wise man once said, and what a wise man would say about Australia, is that for too long and for too much time, we have seemed to surrender community excellence and community values to the mere accumulation of material things. Our gross national product, if we should judge Australia by that, counts air pollution, cigarette advertising, the ambulances to clear the highways of carnage. It counts the special locks on it for our doors and jails and for those who break into them. It counts the destruction of our native gums and the loss of natural wonder for chaotic sprawl. It counts the guns and the weapons of war, the cost of our armies, our navies and our air force, the cost of armoured cars for police to fight crime on our streets. It counts the cost of poison and the cost of illness and the cost of dying, and the television programs which glorify violence in order to sell more toys to children. Yet the gross national product does not allow for the health of children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry, the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wit, our wisdom, or our courage, nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything, in short, except of that which makes life worth living. And it tells us everything about Australia, except why we're proud to be Australian. We think we can make a change, and that's why we're standing at this election. I'm sure we'll make a difference. Thanks very much. Well, we're working on those at the present time. Not being the opposition or the government, we don't have access to the resources which are given freely to the two parties to do that, but we have a team working on that, and by the election time or during that period we'll be making announcements about that.
What would you like to do? I mean, would you like to make a big change to it?
Well, I'd like to make a big change. It's our philosophical view, which I think we've put forward today, that the more money you release in the economy, the more incentive you give to happen. And we've seen that happen in the United States. If you look at President Obama's term of office, you'll see the situation, the global financial crisis, and you contrast that to Australia, you look at the unemployment levels that they faced and how they've changed in the United States, is a direct result of more funds being available in the economy to stimulate the economy. And we think that's a good thing. When you look at Australia's debt level, you see we're among the lowest in the OECD, and we're not trying to push this country to industrialise in any way.
So a radical shake-up, very least.
I think so, yeah.